Okay, let's dive right into one of the most haunting and honestly most widely debated internet mysteries of the entire 21st century. It's a story that completely blurs the lines between true crime, paranormal folklore, and a really deep human tragedy. We're going to explore how a tragic reality blew up into a massive viral sensation, and how a physical location can somehow take on a terrifying life of its own in the public imagination. So, what really happened? We're going to start right in the middle of it all. It's 2013, and we have a 21-year-old student named Elisa Lam. She was from the University of British Columbia in Canada, and she decided to take this solo trip down the west coast of the US, just traveling by Amtrak and buses. In late January, she arrives in Los Angeles and checks into the stay on Main, which, importantly, was a rebranded section of the notorious Cecil Hotel in downtown LA. Now, she was in constant contact with her parents back home right up until January 31st, and then the calls just stopped. She completely vanished. For almost 2 weeks, police are searching this huge hotel. But, without probable cause to search every single room, the trail just went incredibly cold. So, needing the public's help, the LAPD released security camera footage of Elisa's last known whereabouts on February 13th. This 2.5-minute clip from inside one of the hotel's elevators instantly became a viral phenomenon. I mean, on the Chinese video site Youku alone, it racked up like 3 million views and tens of thousands of comments in just 10 days. And when you watch it, well, it is immediately clear why it captured the world's attention. It is deeply unsettling. Just look at her inexplicable movements here. She walks into the elevator and presses almost every single button in the middle row. Then the doors just fail to close. She peers out into the hallway really cautiously, moving her head in this quick, darting motion, almost as if she's hiding from someone or something. She steps out of the elevator, steps back in, and then starts making these incredibly erratic, fluid hand gestures out in the hallway. Eventually, she walks away, and only then do the elevator doors actually slide shut. Well, the mystery of the video took a tragic turn just days later. Guests at the hotel started complaining to management about low water pressure, and even worse, they were saying the water coming out of their taps tasted funny. So, on February 19th, a maintenance worker goes up to the roof to check out the 4 large water cisterns that supply the building. And inside one of those restricted, incredibly hard-to-access tanks, he found Elisa Lam's body. So right away, the internet absolutely exploded with one question. How? How does a young woman bypass locked doors and rooftop alarms, climb up the side of a massive water tank, and end up inside? To figure out why the internet immediately jumped to supernatural conclusions here, we kind of have to zoom out. We need to look at exactly where she was staying. Which brings us to our next section, a history of violence at the Cecil Hotel. Because the building itself isn't just a backdrop for this explainer, it's practically a looming central character. It opened back in 1924 as a middle-class hotel, but it eventually shifted into a budget rooming house near LA's Skid Row, and man, it accumulated an impossibly dark history along the way. Just looking at the timeline, it is literally a century of dread. As early as 1927, a man named Percy Ormond Cook shot himself in the head after separating from his wife. In 1944, a 19-year-old named Dorothy Jean Purcell gave birth in a bathroom, thought the baby had died, and threw the newborn out the window. And in 1964, a beloved local known as Pigeon Goldie Osgood, she used to feed birds in Pershing Square, was found brutally murdered in her ransacked room. Her murder, like several others at the hotel, is still completely unsolved. 16. That is the absolute minimum number of sudden, violent, or unexplained deaths that have occurred in or immediately around the Cecil Hotel. From poisonings to leaps from high windows, the sheer volume of tragedy here completely cemented its macabre reputation as a hotbed for death. And that rolls us right into the serial killer era. You see, the violence wasn't just isolated to heartbroken guests or tragic accidents. The Cecil actually became a magnet for notorious predators. The place was so steeped in darkness that it actively attracted serial killers looking for a cheap, anonymous place to crash between atrocities. The hotel's darkest residents even spawned terrifying copycats. On the one hand, you've got Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker, using the Cecil as a temporary home during his terrifying spree in the 1980s. On the other hand, you have Jack Unterweger, an Austrian serial killer posing as a journalist who came to Los Angeles in 1991. And the really chilling detail? Unterweger specifically chose to stay at the Cecil and allegedly requested the exact same room Ramirez had used to mimic him while he resumed killing. Next up, paranormal theories and myths. With a history that bloody, it is no wonder online sleuths went completely wild trying to explain Elisa's bizarre elevator video.
When you combine a location literally nicknamed the Hotel of Serial Killers with an unexplainable surveillance cape, the internet's imagination runs straight to ghosts and demons.
People online quickly started mapping her button pushing directly onto this urban legend from Korea known as the elevator game. It's this highly specific ritual meant to access a parallel world. You enter alone, press a precise sequence of floors, ignore a mysterious woman who might board, and try to trick the elevator into ascending to an alternate dimension. Sounds crazy, right? But people fully bought into it. This quote really hits the nail on the head. The viral nature of the video, mixed with internet folklore, and just completely overshadowed the facts. Millions of people convinced themselves she had attempted this ritual, that the doors wouldn't close because a spirit was holding them open, and that her fluid hand gestures were literally a conversation with a supernatural entity luring her up to the roof. And adding immense fuel to the fire, true crime historians started noticing these eerie, almost unbelievable coincidences between Elisa Lam and Beth Short, the victim of LA's most famous unsolved murder, the Black Dahlia. Think about it. Both had names derived from Elizabeth. Both were women in their early 20s, petite brunettes who suffered from depression. Both traveled alone from San Diego to downtown LA in January. Both vanished from downtown hotels and were found dead days later in shocking locations. People were just desperate to connect the two cases. But we need to move on to the tragic truth. To really understand what happened here, we have to pivot away from the ghost stories, the copycats, and the urban legends, and look at the sobering medical facts of Elisa's actual life. When you look at the days right before she vanished, you start to get a much clearer and honestly deeply heartbreaking picture of a young woman in severe mental distress. Elisa kept a blog where she wrote really openly about her struggles with mental illness. When she checked into the Cecil, she was originally in a shared hostel-style room, but she got moved to a private room after just 2 days because her roommates complained she was locking them out and leaving notes telling them to go away. Just days before she vanished, she was even escorted out of a live taping of the Conan O'Brien show for disruptive behavior. Now, Elisa had been prescribed a pretty complex cocktail of medications to manage her bipolar disorder and depression, drugs like bupropion, lamotrigine, and quetiapine. Her family actually noted she had a history of not taking her medication, which would trigger severe hallucinations that caused her to hide under her bed for refuge. And this leads us directly to the most vital piece of medical evidence in this entire story. Despite the internet basically screaming about a cover-up or a supernatural event, the coroner's ruling was incredibly clear and heartbreaking. Accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder being a significant contributing factor. This ruling completely debunks the paranormal conspiracies and grounds the story in a very real, very human tragedy. She wasn't fleeing a ghost. She was likely fleeing the terrors of her own mind. The toxicology report was really the final piece of the puzzle here. Blood analysis showed that Elisa hadn't been taking her prescribed medications in the correct amounts to control her bipolar disorder. The tragic truth is that what the internet viewed as some alternate dimension elevator game was actually a devastating manic episode. In a state of severe psychosis, she likely climbed to the roof, accessed the tank, maybe even believing it was a safe place to hide, and accidentally drowned. So that leaves us with a pretty heavy question. When we dive into these massive internet mysteries, are we actually seeking the truth? Or are we just projecting our own desire for a ghost story onto someone else's real-life tragedy? We all love to solve puzzles, right? We love a good spooky story. But I want to leave you to think about how our fascination with true crime and macabre hotel history might sometimes blind us to the heartbreaking human reality right in front of us. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this gave you a clearer, more compassionate lens through which to view the mystery of the Cecil Hotel.